Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for September 9th, 2020. Apologize for the delayed start, but we'll move expeditiously to get us through the calendar. Mr. Secretary, let's begin with the consent agenda. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 8 items on today's consent agenda. Items 1 through 5 are respectively weather station designations from Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, Washington Gas Light Company, Columbia Gas of Maryland, Inc., Sandpiper Energy, Inc., and UGI Utilities, Inc. Items number 6 and 7 are respectively notices of change in ownership from Hospital Energy LLC to Hospital Energy Holding Company LLC relative to its license to supply natural gas or natural gas services and its license to supply electricity or electric generation services. And finally, item number 8 is a notice of name change from Plymouth Rock Energy LLC to NG Power and Gas LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do commissioners have questions on these 8 consent agenda items? Hearing none, I propose that with respect to items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that we approve the weather station for the purpose of determining when there is an extreme weather period which imposes a restriction on termination of service due to a customer's non-payment consistent with COMAR Title 20, Subtitle 31, Chapter 3, Regulations 3 and 4. And with respect to items 6, 7, and 8 that we note the filings, the vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved. Before we move to the administrative agenda, we have meeting minutes to approve from the September 2nd, 2020 meeting. That vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner O'Donnell. I vote aye. The minutes are approved. One moment, please, Mr. Secretary. Are we live now on YouTube? It appears we
Yes,
are.
Mr. Chairman.
We are live.
All right. Well, we'll stitch this together at a later date. We have 3 items, it appears, that on the administrative agenda. One thing that I noted before the Secretary calls them is the impervious nature of the COVID-19 pandemic on a large number of items on our agenda. As we see, it touches the next 3 items that the Secretary will call. This is taking an enormous amount of time and resources, as it should, by this commission as we begin to figure out how to resolve some of the issues that is caused by the economic and the health impacts and fallout related to this ongoing pandemic. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 9 on today's administrative agenda is a notice from the Fuel Fund of Maryland that it has fulfilled its obligation to replenish the quasi-endowment fund to $4.5 million, as well as requests for clarification. On this item for staff, we have Ben Baker and Annette Garofalo. For the Fuel Fund, Deb Brown, Joe Tuminello, and John Pastello.
We'll begin with staff.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Benjamin Baker on behalf of staff. On July 19th, Fuel Fund of Maryland filed notice with the Commission that the company had met its obligation to restore the quasi-endowment fund to $4.5 million. Fuel Fund of Maryland made an additional filing on August 21st, pledging to restore the fund to $5 million and included a proposal for how the company will operate the QEF going forward. These commitments include conservatively investing the QEF with a buffer to preserve the $4.5 million. Fuel Fund Maryland will keep dividends, capital gains, and distributions in a cash account that would not be used until the BGE COVID-19 donation of $1.5 million is completely utilized. That the company would annually add 7% of revenue to the QEF until the QEF was at $5 million, at which point the company would annually add revenue at an unspecified amount. Finally, the company would report quarterly to the Commission. Staff supports Fuel Fund Maryland's proposal and proposes some modifications to provide additional flexibility. The proposed modifications can be found on page 5 of staff's filing. The first modification is to invest the QEF to maintain at least $4.5 million instead of a commitment to invest conservatively. The second modification is to allow Fuel Fund Maryland access to dividends, capital gains, and distributions for bill assistance with no requirement to use a cash account. Finally, the company would report annually instead of quarterly to the Commission. Staff recommends the Commission find that Fuel Fund Maryland Incorporated has met its obligation to restore the quasi-endowment fund to $4.5 million and direct the company to manage the quasi-endowment fund as proposed by Fuel Fund of Maryland with staff's recommended modifications. Thank you, and we are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. We'll turn to the representatives from the Maryland Fuel Fund if they have any comment.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to be in front of you today. Debbie Brown, Director of the Fuel Fund. I have with me Joe Tuminello, who is our Vice Chair, and John Pastello, who is our Investment Committee Chair. Also, we're here for questions based upon the recommendations. And if you would like, if time permits, at the end, we'd love to share with you some numbers of funding that we've been able to put out into the community during the pandemic as a result of the BGE contribution.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Obviously, we've been working with the Fuel Fund since 2018 as the agency of jurisdiction over not the Fuel Fund, but the QEF. I am pleased to see that it's been raised up to the 90% level of the 5 million, so over 4.5. I was taking a look at your portfolio. Hopefully it's been increased recently by the developments in the stock market, but obviously the stock market is rather erratic these days. You made 2 filings, the second one in August of this year, and I suspect it's just a typo, but in looking at your management of the fund and the portfolio, this was on page 3 of your filing. The total doesn't add up to 100%. It adds up to like 120%. I suspect that's a typo. If you take perhaps a quick look at that for me, just so that we have some accurate numbers here. And this is the document dated August 21st.
I'm going to pull it up real quick if you can just give me a second.
Okay, thank you. I suspect your fixed income may only be 37% instead of 57%.
As I'm looking to John, are you want to comment on that by chance? These buttons get me every time. I'm sorry. Yep. Am I on mute?
No, we hear you.
Good. Gotcha. Yeah, it was. I apologize for that. That wasn't a typo.
That was a typo. Okay. So the fixed income is at 37%?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have some questions not germane to this, but to this filing. But since we have you here, I will take up your offer after the other commissioners have had an opportunity to speak to hear about what the fund is doing in light of the current situation. Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering, Ms. Brown, the staff provided some modifications. Can you give us the Fuel Fund's reaction to those modifications? Do you agree with them? Do you not agree with them? Where do you stand with respect to those?
We agree with them. In speaking with Ben and staff going through that, we worked through a couple of those and we're in full agreement with those.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brown and Fuel Fund representatives, I really don't have a question, but I did want to comment and say thank you for getting this fund back into the posture that it needed to be in. We appreciate it. We know it was a painful process and coming to the commission, and you've been through kind of a rough patch, but But the Fuel Fund of Maryland is doing such important work right now in this pandemic, always, but of course, but in this pandemic for certain, and the trying economic times that people find themselves. And I just wanted to thank the Fuel Fund of Maryland for doing what you do. And it's not easy work all the time. We've had maybe some rough patches here in the past few years, but I wanted to just recognize the hard work to restore this QEF back to where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Ms. Brown, at this time, let's receive the update that you offered. Oh, Commissioner Linton, did you have questions on the filing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It was just one question. It was somewhat tangential to the filing, though. It was more along the lines of your earlier comments regarding the current crisis we find ourselves in. I was curious to find out if the Fuel Fund was participating in or has been regularly engaged with some of the other advocacy agencies as they've been working to help find solutions, maybe even some that are a little out of the box. Because unlike the other assistance agencies that exist around the state, the Fuel Fund's assistance model is different, where it requires the customer's contribution and participation. We've had some suggestions that Maryland may want to consider something similar. So I was just curious if you were actively engaged with the various meetings and discussions that are ongoing, so that perhaps people can learn more about the Fuel Fund model for assistance and how that could inform some of the solutions that we look to implement in the future.
Absolutely. Is it okay, Chairman Stan, if I give some updates on some numbers and answer Commissioner Linton's question?
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So far, since the beginning of our fiscal year, which was July 1, obviously numbers are down as a result of COVID-19. In that 10-week period, we've helped about 153 households. It's way down. The majority of households that we are helping now are seniors. The application process has been waived. It does make it a little bit easier, but we do have a volunteer that is mailing out packets to seniors so they can apply for assistance. So again, down, but we're helping only about 17 households a week right now. That's about 65 households a month. Pre-COVID, or last year during this fiscal time, we would have been helping out about 88 to 100 households a week, or roughly 350 to 375 a month. We would be putting out about $30,000 a week in bill assistance to the low-income community, and the average financial grant size would be about $400. So those are the numbers we're looking to get back to. We've spent about $27,000 of that BGE contribution to date in the 10-week period. So we know the floodgates are going to be opening soon. From an outreach perspective, Commissioner Linton, what we've done is every month on the 30th, starting back in March, we've reached out to our 20,000 clients, past and present, and given them steps, empowerment steps that they can do to help reduce their energy bill. So we started back in March, and every month we've been reaching out to them. We've also been meeting with OHEP and BG&E regularly on how we can cooperatively get this message out. And based upon your order back on September 1, letting customers know about the 45-day extension, we were kind of playing around with a public service campaign called 45 to Thrive. And we want to put something together, again, radio, TV, social media, letting the low-income community know, as well as new potential clients that we're going to have, the steps they need to do now to get through energy assistance.
Very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. That is very heartening to hear that you're actively engaged, watching the PSC's action and engaging in this 45 to Thrive campaign. We've encouraged our utilities, and we received their commitment that they will be launching a public service announcement campaign. We did have 3 days of hearings, which ended last week on the COVID crisis. And we heard from a vice president at BGE who stated that of their $1.5 million contribution, only $17,000 had been spent at the time, and I think you just said it's now up to $27,000. And I'm still amazed at the decline in applications that you've seen as the economy and people's need has increased so dramatically. But I think we understand what's behind it, and I think you and your board and the staff of the fund, who have been doing good work over decades, recognize that there is a wave coming, and applicants, as the moratorium expires on October 1st, as terminations can begin on November 15th, the services, the help, the assistance that you and your team provide will be needed now more than ever. So thank you. Any additional questions for the Fuel Fund team?
Chairman Stanek, this is John Pastival. If I could just jump in 1 second.
You may, John.
Just to clarify for the typo, the large cap U.S. equity should be at 21%, not 41%. And just as a side note, I did submit to Ben Baker yesterday a portfolio allocation proposal for our migration to kind of the new portfolio world. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet or not, but what that'll end up doing is actually creating a bit more of a more conservative portfolio with a couple different tiers to help create both a cash account, a bit of a buffer, and still an account for some market-related growth.
Thank you, John. Before I ventured into energy law and regulation, my focus was on accounting law. So it's always important that the numbers pencil out and on the balance sheet. So I appreciate that update, and thank you for sharing that information with Mr. Baker. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm sure we'll receive a copy in due course. So thank you.
We'll provide it.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. At this time, I will move that we find that the Fuel Fund of Maryland Incorporated has met its obligation to restore the quasi-endowment fund to $4.5 million and direct the Fuel Fund to manage the quasi-endowment fund as proposed by the Fuel Fund, subject to staff's recommended modifications in its comments dated September 1st, 2020. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, item number 10 consists of Washington Gas Light Company's 2020 semi-annual STRIDE status report. On this item for staff, we have Nagusi Tesfaye, Annette Garofalo, Patterson. For the company, John Dodge, Jack Morrow, Greg DeCramer, Aaron Stuber, Mike Riley, Matt Esmacher, Thomas Fryer, Andrew Lawson, Jim Wagner, Wayne Jacques, and Tina Ward. And available for questions is Patrick O'Loughlin for the Office of People's Counsel.
Thank you. It appears that Washington Gas Light brought the entire team today. I see Mr. Dodge shaking his head. We'll begin with presentation by staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. Washington Gas Light Company's 2020 semi-annual STRIDE status report is accompanied by notice of certain changes in the company's project list and information on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, which lead to revised 2020 surcharges. Specifically, WGL provides notice regarding changes that occurred during the design of 3 business case authorizations on the Commission-approved STRIDE 2020 project list that resulted in a split into an additional 7 new projects, or 10 in total, to assist with permitting, project management, closeout, and reporting. These revisions resulted in a net reduction in estimated costs of approximately $776,000. In addition, the company included 10 projects in the 2020 semi-annual report to capture units completed and dollars spent in 2020 on projects approved for STRIDE in 2019, but not included in WGL's 2020 project list. All 10 carried over projects are now completed, with approximately $0.6 million in charge to calendar year 2020. WGL's revised STRIDE 2020 surcharges are due to the impact of COVID-19 on projected completion of the 2020 project list, as well as the savings due to the project list changes. This results in a change in the estimated 2020 stride surcharge factors without any effect on the 2019 reconciliation surcharge factors. The revised stride surcharges reflect actual expenditures and collections and estimated expenditures and collections for the remainder of the year. Revised monthly surcharges are summarized on page 16 of staff's comments. Staff recommends the Commission note WGL's 2020 semi-annual stride status report and approve the changes proposed to WGL's 2020 project list. Staff also recommends that the Commission order WGL to request prior approval for any future changes in its Commission-approved project list. And finally, staff recommends the Commission approve the revised stride surcharges proposed by WGL to become effective October 1, 2020. Mr. Negussi Tefeye of the Engineering Division, Mr. Felix Patterson of the Accounting Investigations Division, and Ms. Afton Hauer of the Telecommunications, Gas, and Water Division are available to answer any questions you may have on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. and the staff. Ms. Garofalo, if we could have you mute your mic. It's a particularly sensitive microphone of all those on the screen. We'll next turn to representatives from Washington Gas Light.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. John Dodge appearing on behalf of Washington Gas. 2 points unrelated to stride, if I may start. First, there are other employees of the company making sure that the gas is still flowing in our service territory. Second, I would like to personally thank the chairman for his Baltimore Sun op-ed piece on energy assistance. I think that will go a long way, at least I hope it will, in qualifying Maryland customers for the relief that they need and deserve during this pandemic. Thank you to Ms. Garofalo and the staff for their usual thorough job in examining our report. I want to make clear that we did not pursue completion of stride work or undertake any stride work that had not been previously approved by the commission. Ms. Garofalo said that there are, I believe, 7 new projects. Those are 7 new itemizations. The scope of the work in those projects had been previously associated with other BCAs or projects. So we did not undertake new projects, as we did say last year when we brought a new project on New Hampshire Avenue to the commission's attention for approval. These were just repackaged work groups. And we did that at a point in the life cycle where it was dictated that we needed a little operational flexibility, more insight into those projects was gained. We cannot always guarantee that doing so will result in cost savings, but we do believe that we should have the operational flexibility to repackage prior approved work or scope of work based on field conditions and what our design and build processes turn up. So we disagree slightly with staff's characterization. We take their point that if we have a new scope of work, we would certainly come back to the commission. We simply did not think that happened with these 7 new repackaged projects, if you will. Mr. Ackes and Mr. Morrow are available to speak to that or any other questions you may have. And of course, we have Xerxes Army for any other questions that may come up regarding the report.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Let me inquire of staff if they'd like to respond to Mr. Dodge's last statement regarding these repackaging of projects.
So I did use the word new in my presentation. I can tell you that because I have it written. But I did say that it was the redesign of 3 business case authorizations, which were on the stride improved project list. So in that sense, I agree they weren't new, but Mr. Tefeye may who is closer in time and interest to that might see it differently, and he might have something a little bit different take on that.
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. When we do analysis of the project submitted by WGL, if WGL always be able to notify us, we will be able to follow up with the projects instead of just adding or changing the number of projects when they are coming to file semi-annual or reconciliation. So I agree they are not new projects, but it is a split of existing 3 projects which are in the calendar year 2020 approved project list. But it will be good if WGL come forward, let us know, they are doing, the split in this project so that we can be able to follow, because, when we get a project list, we go through them and make sure they are eligible for the STRIDE, replacement project. So
that is
that's
helpful. I think one of the benefits for having these semi-annual meetings and the semi-annual report is to review any adjustments to the project list that come along.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. I do have a few questions, Mr. Dodge, and you could direct them to the appropriate staff. A few weeks ago, we had the Columbia Gas semi-annual STRIDE, and obviously by orders of magnitude, the Washington Gas Light STRIDE portfolio is much larger. And this was more of a COVID update. In addition to the semi-annual report, we've heard a lot of the concerns, whether it be supply chain or be it customers. It sounds like there were 9 customers who were standing effectively in the way of a main replacement, if I understood that correctly. What recourse does the utility have when Washington Gas employees knock on the door and the one customer says, I'm not letting you in the house, thereby stopping your STRIDE project in its tracks? How do you resolve that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will take a crack at that because I've been very involved in the few instances that we have experienced in that vein. We have essentially experienced 2 different types of denials of access, if you will. The first is non-responsiveness. We have a field protocol about reaching out, attempting to make contact at least 3 times when we're in a neighborhood. That can involve telephone calls, door knockers, personal visits. If we do not get any response at all after our several attempts at contact, we do go ahead and temporarily disconnect service to effect the change. And then it is incumbent upon the customer to contact us to have their appliances relit once their individual distribution line is finished. So that is in just when somebody goes silent on us and we don't have any other recourse. If, however, we do make contact with a customer and they express any health concern, we stop the STRIDE project in its tracks, to borrow your phrase. We do not force our way in, even though we practice social distancing, even though our crews are outfitted fully with PPE, even though in certain circumstances, we're in and out in just a matter of minutes. If a customer raises any health concern, we had one instance where a family had essentially created their own bubble in the grandparents' home, and there was a newborn child in the home. And understandably, the family was very nervous about admitting anybody from the outside world. So we simply stopped the replacement project. And when that customer is comfortable, and hopefully the child is doing great, and when they are ready for us to go into the home after their health concerns have been resolved, we will pick up where we left off. So those are the 2 circumstances we have undertaken so far. And I don't know if Mr. Ackus or Mr. Morrow have any more to add on that.
Good afternoon, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. This is Jack Morrow. John captured most of that exactly of what we've done in the past. Whenever we have a customer that does kind of have the COVID-19 mentality of health issues or anything like that, we will stop. We will continue to contact the customers to try to work with them. Total so far, we've had 64 separate customers that have had these concerns, and throughout the last few months, we've been able to do some of those services and get those accomplished. So now we're down to only 36 customers refusing access, but as a little update, it was 9. Now we're up to about 12 customers that's holding up the abandonment of about 3.5 miles of main. So we will continue to work with these customers as they feel comfortable or their health issues improve, then we'll work with them and complete the projects.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Obviously, this was not expected when we approved the 2020 Stride Plan that there would be delays related to COVID. It is disappointing that not all of these projects can move forward on the schedule because customers, rightfully so, may choose not to allow your employees on the premises. I do have one more question before yielding. Mr. Dodge, I know 9 out of the 11 big projects are on track for completion. 2 of them, I believe, in Bowie and Upper Marlboro, have some unspecified siting or permit delays. Can you elaborate further on what those delays entail?
For that, I will turn to Mr. Akis and perhaps Mr. Morrow to elucidate us all on those particular issues.
I think those are in regards to the transmission project, so I'm going to default, John, to Aaron or Tom Fry.
So Aaron Stuber is on the call, Mr. Chairman, and he will tackle the question.
I'm glad we have a dozen people on the call. So
yeah, I'm actually going to defer to Tom Fryer, who is closer to those projects. So we're passing the buck here, but we'll get you an answer.
Mr. Dodge, you might.
I'm sorry, this is Tom. Could that question be repeated?
Yes. I noted in your filing that 2 of the large transmission projects are not slated to be completed on time in 2020. Those are the projects, I believe it was Oak Hill in Bowie and another project in Upper Marlboro. And the filing merely stated that there was some type of permitting delay. And I'd like to know a little bit more about what's causing these projects to be off track.
Right, there was an easement had to be obtained and for the Prince George's project in order to get a permit approved for the fine grading. The easement had to actually be recorded. They wouldn't just it's being done. The easement has taken a little bit longer. We're still working with the homeowner. We have agreement in principle. We just don't have a signed easement at this time. So once we have the signed easement, we would submit to the county, which is generally taken upwards of 6 weeks for this type of permit, which is pretty typical and we're used to. But at that point, that puts that project too far into the heating season to have it safely accomplished. So we've postponed that.
Okay, what about the other project?
The other one was just permitting. It was we're going back and forth with some of the permit agencies and still have not had all of the permits approved. Some are, but not 100%.
Okay. Thank you. I'll yield to my colleagues. Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions for staff because I'm confused. Are you asking that we would have to approve changes to, and not so much to the projects, but just, for accounting reasons or for reasons of permitting or whatever, that they get, split into 2 projects instead of 1? Are you saying that we have to have a separate review and approval of that?
Again, I'm going to defer to Mr. Tefeye, but I would say the problem with the split of the projects is that we have a list we look at, and when something like the mid-year report or the end-of-year report comes in, and especially when it's accompanied by a change of the stride surcharge, which in this case went down, but it could happen that something else it could go up. We would like to notice of that, and we would like to that brought to the commission.
Well, I guess, notice is one thing, approval is another, in my view, that if it's helpful to the staff that the projects haven't changed, they're still replacing the same main or whatever the particular project is, it's the same project. And for whatever reason, accounting or permitting or whatever, it gets changed. I understand the notice so you can follow it more easily. That makes sense to me, but I'm kind of confused by why we need to approve it. If it's the same, same length of main in place, why do we need to approve it?
I think we can't be sure that it's really the same project, but Nagusi, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, if I can, Commissioner, with these 3 BCA, we get first to approve stride project list, right? So the project list contains a specific quantity of projects. So we follow up on those projects and check their eligibility. Let's say we say WGL has, 92, just example, 92 or 93 stride projects for the calendar year 2020, right? Now in this specific filing, WGL has splitted 3 BCS from the distribution project into further 7 projects. I wouldn't have any problem with that because those 3 BCS are already approved in the calendar year 2020. So they just, for some operational reasons, they just splitted those 3 BCS into further 7 BCS, and they made additional 10 projects. That's fine. So we just need to make sure, the commission noted about those changes at the same time. Also, the staff has a good communication before WGL makes any change in those project lists. We follow, to let us know about that. I wouldn't have any issue with those 3 BCS, which are split into 7 further BCS to make a total of 10 projects. But there is also a change in the project list WGL has made by bringing 10 additional projects from the calendar year 2019 into this year, and those 10 projects were not mentioned in the calendar year 2020 filing. That's, I think, a change which bring additional 10 projects to the calendar year 2020, which, in my opinion, that's why I am asking the commission to note and do your recommendation if that needs to be approved. But the problem with these are that they were not included in 2020 filing.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about that separately because that to me is two different. That's two different.
Yes.
Is it in your view, is it sufficient to get notice? Say if a company is going to change project numbers and for your tracking purposes, but it's the same project. It's the same 3 miles of main, and they divide it up into mile 1, mile 2, and mile 3 for whatever reason it makes it more efficient for them. that, is it sufficient for you to get notice of that?
It's good. I mean, I don't have any issue with that as
Okay, we don't need to approve that in your view. Does the commission?
No, I don't think it needs separate approval, but we just went, because this is, you know, a few times I've engaged in a stride project, you know, this project. So I just want to make sure that any change I found in my analysis or review is worth, you know, to let the commission know about that, you know.
Okay, so Mr. Dodge, well, hold on one sec. Mr. Dodge, would you have any issue with providing notice if you're going to be changing project numbers and separating them into different projects to assist with the analysis by the staff so they can do their tracking? Would you have any issues with providing that kind of notice?
We would be happy to provide the notice. We thought it was appropriate to do it in this semi-annual report, but we're happy to work with staff about some more interstitial approach to providing notice.
Okay, thanks. So now let's talk, Mr. Dodge, about the second issue, which is the canceling some of the 2020 projects because you brought up some projects from 2019 that were finished in 2020. Was that included, while those projects weren't included on the 2020 project list, were those projects that were included in your plan, you know, showing us that, you know, from 19 to 20, they were not previously, they were still on the list, but as unfinished?
You're exactly correct, Your Honor. Those 10 projects had been approved for the 2019 list. I'm not sure if it was before 2019, but at least the 2019 list. So as we have the capacity, the crews, the resources available, we will dip back into prior years, as we have done in the past, to select those projects for completion in the current calendar year. So again, we're happy to provide notice to staff when we do that, but we do not want to be operationally handcuffed to say, oh, we have to come back to the commission to get further approval of a prior approved project that we suspended because of permitting or some other issue. We do want the flexibility to move around within commission approved projects, if you will.
Okay, but you did remove some approved projects out of the 2020 list in order, I thought I saw that, in order to complete the 2019 projects. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate. I think that it may be more coincidental that we had some 2020 projects which we knew for permitting or other reasons would not be completed. So we filled in with the 2019 projects, but Mr. Ackes can speak to that.
So thank you, John. I think from a notice standpoint, it's a timing issue. It just happened to time up with the semi-annual. We had planned to notify staff of those additional projects. So that was just a matter of timing. As far as the company has not canceled any projects for 2020. Now, based on the COVID situation, we have one, I think it's program 5A, where we notice we're having access issues with customers. So we revised that completion rate, and we're proposing but we think we're not going to hit those targets. So the projects that we know we could get done, we're working those to get completed. The 2019 projects that were completed in 2020, those were, as John previously stated, there were prior approved projects. We had planned to get them completed by the end of the year. They weren't completed for one reason or another, and those didn't make the list because we had planned to get them completed.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ackes. Mr. Chairman, I'll just state for my part that I appreciate the staff needing notice so that they can track more easily the projects and that. But I personally, I don't support the commission approval of that. I think if it's an already approved project and it's a divvying it up for efficiency, that we shouldn't have to go back and approve it since it's already been approved. So that's my position on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everyone's indulgence.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some question, maybe a question for staff and maybe a couple questions for the company. But first, let me commend Mr. Dodge for his seamless use of the word interstitial. It's one of my favorite words. Thank you for that. For staff, I noticed in the buck sheet, there's, unlike some of the other gas companies in Stride, there's no discussion here, or unless I missed it, and I'm willing to be corrected, of course, if I did miss it. No discussion of low pressure main replacement. Help me out with that. Why not?
I can speak on that, Commissioner. I think in the budget, maybe on the page, there is some discussion about the low pressure pipes.
What page?
Let me get the page for you. So, on page 13. On page 13.
1 second, please.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. I stand corrected. There was some discussion, although you might understand why I would have missed it. It was such a small discussion.
Yeah.
And almost almost seems like it's not a priority. And the company has told me repeatedly that it is, just as a matter of other related categories, and we'll get to it when we get to it. But some of the companies have really gone a long way to detailing and chronicling specific replacements. And although there's some mention of it there, I don't feel Washington Gas is giving it the same attention as maybe some of the other utilities. So let me turn to the company and ask you to comment on that first, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your compliment on my vernacular earlier. Every once in a while, those SAT prep classes come back to haunt me. Low pressure replacement continues to be part of our STRIDE program. As we have discussed before, it is not a separate program within STRIDE for us. I will say it is weighted using our Optimain and other risk ranking tools, and we devote the resources that those objective criteria dictate for low pressure. If it is the will of this commission that we depart from our current processes of targeting low pressure main for replacement, we will follow the commission's will. I can promise you that. But as it stands today, as a result of the several years worth of work group discussions, the criteria by which we agreed to be bound, and might I sidebar, for which we have been criticized if we try to depart from, again, we will follow the commission's will on low pressure. Until that time, we feel we're a bit betwixt and between, Your Honor. We hear your concern.
I appreciate that, Mr. Dodge. Let me just stop you there. I do appreciate it. I can't speak for the commission. I'm speaking as one commissioner. The commission can make that decision, but we may not make that. The commission may not make that decision. But I will tell you that your position was the same before a utility in Massachusetts was blown up, figuratively, if not literally. And there was a loss of life, and 80-some buildings were destroyed, and a utility was effectively put out of business. And part of my job is to make sure our utilities are not put out of business. And so you're going to continue to hear me question this issue. Like it or not, it's my ability to do that. And I'm going to continue to do it just as a matter of my commitment to the citizens of the state of Maryland vis-a-vis my position on the Public Service Commission as a commissioner. So I'm not directing you to do that, but I'm going to continue to ask questions publicly for it. You used Optimane and all those objective criteria that you referred to prior to the explosions in Andover and North Andover. And you're using them now, and I don't see any change, and you're telling me no change. And I don't understand that.
If I may, Your Honor, within the context of our STRIDE program, we continue to hew to the objective measurements and metrics for risk ranking amongst all of our asset classes. We have filed with the Commission at least once and maybe twice our specific response to the Andover incident. And we do have very specific operational responses to what happened in Massachusetts. We are confident that those operational responses, which have changed our internal processes for managing our low pressure network, that we continue to provide safe and reliable service on the remaining portion of our system that is low pressure. As just one example, I recall that we had a significant stand down period where we essentially did field and managerial retraining on the management of our low pressure operations so that we did not fall into the same trap that Columbia Gas of Massachusetts did. We took all of the lessons learned, we updated our internal processes, so we are confident that apart from the STRIDE replacement of low pressure, we did respond. We did take lessons learned from what happened in Massachusetts. So I was answering your question, your first question, in the narrower sense of why haven't you changed STRIDE? The answer is, as I said, Optimane et al. Dictates that we cannot change. But separately, we have responded internally to the lessons learned from Massachusetts.
I can tell you there's a distinct difference between the replacement of the age and dangerous infrastructure and other utilities than it is from Washington Gas. It's clear. It's as clear as night and day. And I'm not asking you to change your programming. I'm not asking to micromanage your business. I'm asking you to demonstrate, and I see a dearth of demonstration in your filings, that it's on the minds of your planners and your company to get this low pressure main out of the ground. And to me, I mean, look, operational concerns are very important and operational changes are important, but there's nothing like replacing aged infrastructure. There are other reasons it's aged and it needs replaced. You got water intrusion, you got a lot of other reasons, but the inherent danger of low pressure systems, if they are over pressurized, notwithstanding your operational changes and controls, are very dangerous, as evidenced in Massachusetts. So I'll let it go at that, but when I see other utilities trying to at least demonstrate they're in the same position. They haven't made it a priority or a separate class, but at least they're saying, hey, we probably ought to demonstrate some of this stuff so that the big accident does happen and these conversations are replayed again and again, that at least we will have shown that we were making a concerted effort. So I'll end there on that note. I want to shift to COVID, if I might. So COVID, it seems to me in your filing is hindering you. Is that a generalization that fits? Is that accurate?
I think it is. I think it was more pronounced earlier in the calendar year, and we have returned to a new normal since then. But certainly our results show that COVID has hindered us, yes.
So I think we had testimony recently from another large gas distribution company in Maryland that said COVID was actually accelerating their STRIDE work because of the lack of traffic and other things, and they were able to get stuff in the ground and move faster. And why the 180 between two utilities? One says it's speeding things up, and the other one says it's slowing it down. I don't get it.
You know, Your Honor, I had that same question in my mind when I heard that other large gas utility say that they'd been able to speed things up. I think one answer, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Ackus and Mr. Morrow. One answer is that other large utility was, I believe, talking about downtown Baltimore. where they do a lot of their stride work, and the lack of traffic downtown for them really made a meaningful difference in their rollouts. Most of our Maryland stride is not in a downtown situation like downtown Washington, D.C., which is our urban core. So I think that may be one difference. I cannot tell you today how we compare apples to apples with, say, BG&E. But now I'll turn over to Mr. Ackus and Mr. Morrow, or somebody else, another one of our designated hitters on our extended team here today, to speak to whether COVID has enabled us to speed up certain stride operations.
Good morning. This is Jack Morrow again with Washington Gas. John, Mr. Dodge, you are absolutely correct. But also, if you notice, the where we have been able to accelerate is getting main installed. We switched from customer-facing work. So again, I don't know the other companies' projects, but they also might have been able to accelerate the installation of their mains. If they have large stretches of main to replace and retire that don't have a large number of services on it, that could cause an issue. And unfortunately, like you said, John, in downtown Baltimore with less traffic, they probably are able to get more work done downtown there. But again, like I said, we've been able to accelerate the installation of the main to get ahead of that curve. Where we're getting hindered is with the replacement of services and then the subsequent abandonment of that main. So we're ahead of target on installed mains, but with our customers not willing to allow us into their homes to replace their service, then we can't do that work. And then that also affects the total abandonment that we can do. And each system is a little different. I don't know. They could have a back feed, a two-way feed where they could abandon a portion of the pipe. And that's what we've been doing. We've been looking at our projects so that we can have continuity in our service. And if we can abandon a section up into right before that customer's service line, we're doing it in smaller chunks. But unfortunately, we can't abandon the whole main line until that customer gets off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the respondents.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seeing no other commissioners seeking recognition, I recognize that the 2020 scope of work is substantial, over 1,500 services, a number of miles of replacement and retirement, and millions of dollars and cents. I did note that the residential decrease is, I forgot the exact numbers, but it's about a 40% decrease on the monthly surcharge. While it might just be pennies to some, the 30 or 40 cents may make a difference for some families. So it's a substantial, I would dare say substantial rate increase, at least for residential and all the customer categories that this commission is being asked to vote on today. Commissioner Herman's proposal that we receive notice of changes to pre-approved projects, rather having the commission approve them yet again, is reasonable, and I am prepared to modify the motion to provide the commission with notice of any change, at which time, if staff sees a problem, they could bring it to our attention and the commission could seek action rather than having this item, which is not a new item, I think staff concedes, brought before the commission at an AM, which would necessarily entail some delay in moving forward with the project. So I'll propose Commissioner Herman's motion in my motion, if I see no objection from my colleagues, and we'll take it from there. So seeing no additional persons wishing to be recognized, I do move that we note the company's 2020 annual stride report. We approve the changes proposed by Washington Gas Light to its commission-approved Stride 2020 project list. We direct the company to provide notice regarding any future changes in the commission-approved project list. And we approve the company's proposed Stride surcharge revisions which are reductions. And we direct the company to file revised tariff pages reflecting the company's proposed surcharges. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
and Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motions are approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. We hope to see everybody in person soon.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, item number 11 on today's agenda consists of the 2020 Procurement Improvement Process Report from the Commission's Staff Council Division. On this item for staff, we have Lloyd Spivak, for PHI, Matt Seegers and Diana Novak, for BG, Beverly Sikora and Jasmine Kakar, for Potomac Edison, Jeffrey Trout and Robert Reaping. Available for questions. William Fields.
Thank you. I recognize we have at least 4 utilities on the line for this item. We'll begin with a presentation by staff. Mr. Spivak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. Under the Phase 2 settlement approved by the Commission in case number 8908, staff is required to convene a meeting at least annually to consider improvements to the Maryland Standard Offer Service procurement process. This is the second such meeting in 2020. It occurred on July 6, 2020, and 6 proposals were considered by the parties. None of the proposals were controversial, and they are all encompassed within the report staff filed on August 26, 2020. In addition to updating the bid schedule for the coming year, the parties have adopted 6 proposals. The first is the use of an electronic letter of credit. The second is backup email communication. The third is the continued use of a proxy price for capacity for the 2021 RFP. The FERC and PJM have not yet resolved their dispute on the subject. The fourth proposal is a update to the billing line items contained in the FSA Exhibit D. These items match the changes made by PJM. Fifth item is to replace wire with automated clearinghouse money transfers in FSA Exhibit G. And the sixth and final proposal is to clarify that bid assurance collateral of $600,000 per block for bidders that are rated but do not qualify to receive unsecured credit. Staff requests that the Commission accept the staff report and the proposals it contains, as well as the attached model bid documents for the coming bid year.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. I recognize that the public and the parties had an opportunity to comment on the procurement process improvement report. This is, in many respects, inside baseball, so we did not receive any comments, but I'd allow any of the utilities on the line or OPC, if you have comments, to speak now before the commissioners. All right, no takers. I recognize that this was these plans were agreed to, and the procurement process is a consensus piece here. I also recognize that COVID-19 bleeds into the way that we're going to be conducting bidding remotely for this foreseeable future, in addition to the letter of credit that we're going to be handled electronically now. I was actually surprised that it was done. Mr. Spivak, was it done in hard copy beforehand? Before this?
Generally speaking, that's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, but you would probably want to confirm that with the individual utilities.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we're making these accommodations, these COVID-related accommodations. The whole suite of packages appear to be an improvement to the existing process. So I have nothing further to say. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Spivak, or anybody who may know the answer to this question, has there been any, if there has been any, discernible impact of using the proxy price for the last two base residual auctions on our procurement process? In other words, have we noticed anything? Is it status quo ante? It worked very well. I know the recommendation is to continue to use it, but considering we've done it twice now, have we been able to discern any impact of the use of that proxy price?
I don't think we've seen any impact with respect to, for example, the number of bidders, and the number of blocks people bid with the mechanics of the process. I think it's too early to determine if there's any impacts on pricing, but to the extent that there are, I think we'd anticipate that they would be very minimal.
And remind me what the true-up process is if there is a pricing impact. How do we reconcile that?
I mean, my understanding is that at the point in time where the prices become known, where the capacity price at that time become known, the prices the price in the contract is simply changed to match that and the bidders will receive the actual capacity price. And to the extent that any of the utility people present would like to elaborate or clarify that, I certainly would not mind if they do so.
Mr. Reaping, you're still muted.
Still muted, Bob.
You're still muted.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. What I wanted to say is that I concur with Mr. Spivak on several levels. Number one, going back to the prior question on the use of the proxy price and any impact on bidding. So far, we have not seen any impact on the amount of competition associated with our standard offer service procurements using the proxy price. That has stayed, at least for Potomac Edison, consistent. Additionally, we internally do some price evaluations prior to the solicitations, and pricing has come in within normal expectations, similar to what we had prior to the proxy price. So at this point in time, we, at least from Potomac Edison perspective, have not seen any indication that there are any additional risk premiums. Part of that, I believe, is based on the way that we have designed the proxy price and the true-up. Within the proxy price, Mr. Spivak is correct. We have the proxy once the actual price is known for the applicable planning year. We will work with the winning suppliers. We will adjust the proxy price. We will true up with them based on what they are charged from PJM. And also based on the amount, the peak load contribution that they are using, PJM uses to create their bill. So essentially it creates a seamless and a risk-free situation for them during this extenuating circumstance.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. Seeing no commissioners seeking recognition, I would move that we note the 2020 Procurement Process Improvement Report, and that we approve the 2020 to 2021 Standard Offer Service bid procurement documents, including the proposed utility bid plans, request for proposals, and full requirements services. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion for item number 11 is approved.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. With nothing remaining on the commission's docket this morning, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.